My husband faked his own death for insurance money. The bank manager kept the secret for 5 years. He was buried on a Tuesday. The whole village came. Women wailed, children cried, his mother collapsed twice, and his wife, Ijeoma, stood at the graveside holding their 3-year-old daughter, staring at the coffin, wondering how she was going to survive. But here is the thing nobody knew. The coffin was filled with sand. And if you think that is the most disturbing part of this story, stay with me. Because what the bank manager knew, what he hid for 5 years, what Ijeoma eventually discovered, that is what will make your jaw drop to the floor. If you are new here, subscribe right now, because the stories we tell on this channel will keep you up at night in the best possible way. Now, let's go. Ijeoma Obichina was not a woman you would describe as soft. She had grown up in Oguta, in the heart of Imo State, the third daughter of a man who believed that hardship was the best teacher. Her father never gave her anything easy. When she wanted school fees, she fetched water and sold it. When she wanted a new dress, she plaited hair on weekends. By the time she was 22, she had learned that life owed her nothing, and she owed life everything. That was why when she met Chukwuebuka Obichina at a market in Owerri, she did not fall for him immediately. She watched him first. She observed the way he spoke to the pepper seller, the way he greeted the old men sitting by the roadside, the way he laughed, full, unashamed, like a man who had nothing to hide. She told her friend Ngozi later that evening, "That man is either very good or very dangerous. I cannot tell which." She should have listened to that instinct. They married in 2009. Chukwuebuka was a car dealer, or so he said. He had a small lot on the outskirts of Owerri where he bought second-hand vehicles, cleaned them up and resold them. Business was decent, not rich, but comfortable. They moved into a rented flat in Nekede, had a daughter, little Chisom, and life for a while was ordinary and good. But Ijeoma started noticing things in 2012. Little things at first. Chukwuebuka would take phone calls outside, closing the door behind him, his voice dropping to a whisper when she walked near. He started coming home later than usual, sometimes well past midnight, smelling not of another woman, but of something she could not name. Anxiety, maybe, or guilt. She asked him once, calmly, what was happening. He kissed her forehead and said, "Nothing, my love. Business stress. You know how it is." She accepted it. She should not have. In March of 2013, Chukwuebuka called her from work, which was unusual because he almost never called in the middle of the day, and told her he was going to Abuja for a deal, a big one. He said if it worked out, they could finally buy land and build their own house. He sounded excited, happy even. She remembers laughing with him on the phone, telling him to be careful on the road. That was the last time she heard his voice. 2 days later, a man she had never seen before knocked on her door. He introduced himself as a driver who worked on the Owerri-Abuja road. He told her with his cap in his hands and his eyes on the floor that there had been an accident, a bad one, on the Lokoja stretch. The vehicle had veered off the road and caught fire. He said Chukwuebuka did not make it. Ijeoma stood there for 40 seconds without saying a word. Then she sat down on the floor, right there in the doorway, and she did not get up for a long time. The burial was a blur. Ijeoma remembers faces, her mother-in-law, her sisters, Ngozi holding Chisom so she wouldn't see her mother breaking apart. She remembers the pastor saying things about heaven and peace. She remembers the coffin being lowered. She remembers thinking, I did not even see his body. They told her that the fire had been so severe there was nothing left to identify properly. The driver had identified the vehicle, a few personal effects, his watch, his wallet had been recovered. She was a widow at 26 years old. The weeks after the burial were the darkest of her life. She stopped eating properly. She stopped sleeping. Little Chisom would climb into her bed at night and press her small warm body against her mother's back, and sometimes that was the only thing that tethered her to the earth. Then, 6 weeks after the burial, something unexpected happened. A man in a suit knocked on her door. He said his name was Mr. Okonkwo Celestine. He was the manager of Zenith Commercial Bank Owerri. He said he had come regarding a life insurance policy. Ijeoma had not known her husband had a life insurance policy. Mr. Okonkwo sat down across from her in her small sitting room with his briefcase on his knee and explained that 18 months ago, Chukwuebuka Obichina had taken out a life insurance policy worth 4 million naira and that she, Ijeoma, was the named beneficiary. She stared at him. "My husband never told me about this," she said. Mr. Okonkwo smiled, and here is what Ijeoma will remember for years afterwards. It was not a warm smile, it was controlled, careful, like a man choosing his words inside his head before his face agreed to react. He said, "Many husbands do not tell their wives. It is a gift in case of the worst." She signed the papers. The money came through within a month. 4 million naira deposited into an account Mr. Okonkwo helped her open. "You are a young woman with a child," he told her on the day the money cleared. "Invest wisely. Do not let people advise you to waste it." She thanked him. He left. And then for 5 years, she did not see Mr. Okonkwo Celestine again. Ijeoma used the money carefully. She bought a small plot of land in her hometown of Oguta and started a provision shop, then a second one. She went back to school part-time and got a diploma in business management. She raised Chisom with love and discipline, the way her own father had raised her. By 2018, she had rebuilt herself into something solid. She was not rich, but she was standing on her own ground. She did not date. Not because she was still in love with a ghost, she had made her peace with that, but because she was not ready, and because something still sat at the back of her mind, unresolved, like a door that had never been properly closed. That feeling got a name on a Thursday afternoon in October 2018. She was at a shop in Owerri when she saw a man across the street. A tall man, light-skinned, walking quickly, head slightly down, dressed in casual clothes. He had a phone pressed to his ear, and he was laughing, that full, unashamed laugh that she had once said meant a man had nothing to hide. Ijeoma stood, perfectly still, for 5 full seconds. Then she walked across the street. She grabbed his arm. He turned around, and she was looking at her dead husband's face. The world did not stop. That is the thing about real shock. It does not look dramatic. Ijeoma did not scream. She did not faint. She simply stood there, holding his arm, while everything she had believed for 5 years rearranged itself inside her chest, like shards of broken glass finding new positions. The man looked at her, and for 1 second, just one, she saw terror in his eyes. Then he said, "Sister, I think you have mistaken me for someone else." His voice was different, a Lagos accent, thick and deliberate, nothing like Chukwuebuka's Owerri lilt. "I am not your sister," Ijeoma said quietly, "and you are not a stranger." He pulled his arm away and walked quickly in the other direction. She followed him with her eyes until he turned a corner. Then she stood there on that street for a long time, her fabric bag in her hand, her heart doing something between breaking and burning. Now, here is where this story becomes something else entirely. Because most people in that moment would have gone to the police or confronted their in-laws or called a lawyer. Ijeoma went home, put Chisom to bed, sat down at her kitchen table and started thinking. She's that kind of woman, the kind who thinks before she moves, the kind her father made. She thought about the insurance policy she had never known about. She thought about Mr. Okonkwo's careful smile. She thought about the driver who had come to her door with his cap in his hands, a man she had never seen before or since. She thought about a coffin full of sand. And she thought about one question, the kind that once it enters your mind, it will not leave. Who else knew? This is the moment to stop and take a breath, because what Ijeoma was about to uncover was not just a betrayal by one man, it was a web, a careful, calculated web. And if you are the kind of person who appreciates stories like this one, real, raw, and deeply human, then subscribe right now, because we are not even at the worst part yet. Ijeoma spent 3 days doing nothing but watching. She called in sick at her shop. She left Chisom with Nguzi and she watched. She went to the neighborhood where she had seen the man because she knew it was him, no matter how her rational mind tried to argue otherwise. She described him to a suya seller, a woman who sold drinks from a cooler on the corner, a young mechanic who worked near that block. The mechanic said, "You mean Uchenna? The one who manages that property company on the next street?" Ijeoma's heart stopped. She said, "Yes, that one. Uchenna, not Chukwebuka. A new name, a new life, but the same face." She found the property company easily. It was a real business with a painted sign and a receptionist. She did not go in. She sat across the street in a keke and watched. And after 40 minutes, she saw him come out of the building, unlock a Toyota Camry, a new one, and drive away. Alive, well-fed, successful, 5 years dead. She went home and thought for one more day. Then she went to find Mr. Okonkwo Celestine. He was still the branch manager of the same bank. When she walked in and asked to see him, the receptionist smiled and said he was in a meeting. Ijeoma sat down and waited. She waited for 1 hour and 20 minutes. She did not look at her phone, she just sat there. When Mr. Okonkwo finally came out of his office and saw her waiting, something passed across his face, quick, almost invisible, but she caught it. He composed himself in less than a second and smiled at her. "Ijeoma, it has been a long time. Come in, come in." His office was air-conditioned and smelled of leather. He offered her water. She declined. He sat across from her and folded his hands on the desk and waited for her to speak. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, "I saw my husband last Thursday." Silence. Not the silence of a confused man, not the silence of shock, the silence of a man deciding which direction to run. "Your husband is," he started. "Alive," she said. "He is alive and living in Owerri under a different name, running a property business, driving a Camry. I stood close enough to him to see the scar on his left hand from when he cut himself repairing a car engine in 2011. It is him, and you know it is him." Mr. Okonkwo looked at her for a very long time. Then he leaned forward and said, in a voice very different from the warm, professional tone he had used, "You should be very careful, Ijeoma. Some things are better left alone." She did not blink. "Tell me everything." What he told her, not willingly, not all at once, but piece by piece under the quiet pressure of a woman who had absolutely nothing left to lose, was this. Chukwuebuka had come to Mr. Okonkwo 2 years before the fake death. He had gotten into debt, serious debt. Not car dealing debt, gambling debt. He had been running a side operation with some men from Port Harcourt, betting on football and borrowing money to cover losses. By early 2012, he owed people who did not accept excuses, people who made problems disappear. He came to Mr. Okonkwo, his childhood friend from secondary school, and laid out a plan. He would fake his death. The insurance company would pay out, Ijeoma would collect the money and be taken care of. He would start a new life somewhere else, under a new name. In 2 or 3 years, once the dust had settled, he would find a way to reach out to her, explain everything, and bring her and Chisom to join him. That was the plan. Mr. Okonkwo agreed to help for a share of the payout. He had used his position at the bank to arrange the policy to process the payout smoothly to ensure there were no red flags, and he had kept the secret for 5 years. When Ijeoma asked Chukwuebuka why he had never come back for her and Chisom as he promised, Mr. Okonkwo was quiet for a moment. Then he said he remarried about 2 years ago. The room was very, very still. Ijeoma sat there and absorbed that. She had rebuilt her life from rubble. She had raised his daughter alone. She had grieved a man who was not dead, buried a coffin filled with sand, spent years in the shadow of a loss that was a lie, and he had moved on, made a new family. She stood up, picked up her bag, and said one thing before she walked out. "You have 2 days." She did not explain what she meant, but Mr. Okonkwo understood, and so apparently did Chukwuebuka, because within 48 hours, Ijeoma received a phone call from a number she did not recognize. She answered. The voice on the other end said, "Ijeoma." She said nothing. He said, "I know you know. I am asking you to hear me out." She said, "You have 10 minutes. What followed was not the tearful confession of a broken man. That would have been easier to deal with. What she got, instead, was a man who had spent 5 years rehearsing his justification. He told her about the debt, the threats, the fear. He told her he had no choice. He told her he had always intended to come back for her. He told her the second marriage was complicated, that he had made mistakes. He did not apologize, not properly. He explained. There is a very big difference. When his 10 minutes were up, Ijeoma said, "There is a woman who married you not knowing you are already married to me. And there is a daughter who believes her father is dead. I am not doing this for you. I am doing it for them." She hung up. The next morning, Ijeoma walked into the Owerri State CID and laid out everything. She brought documentation, the insurance policy, the bank records Mr. Okonkwo inadvertently confirmed, the details of the fake accident, the name Chukwuebuka was now living under. She was calm the entire time. She spoke clearly and without drama. The officer who took her statement kept looking up from his notepad at her, the way people look at someone doing something extraordinary. Chukwuebuka, living as Uche Naubi, was arrested 3 days later at his property office. Mr. Okonkwo Celestine was suspended from the bank pending an investigation that same week. The insurance company filed to recover the 4 million naira. And Ijeoma, sitting at her kitchen table that night while Chisom slept, did something she had not allowed herself to do in years. She cried. Not the way she had cried at that fake graveside, not the hollow, shattered crying of a woman in shock. This was different. This was a woman releasing something that had been sitting on her chest for 5 years without her even knowing it was there. Because grief, it turns out, is not always for the dead. Sometimes it is for the version of your life you are supposed to have. The trial took 11 months. Chukwuebuka was charged with insurance fraud, identity deception, and bigamy. Mr. Okonkwo was charged as an accomplice to fraud and abuse of his position. But here is the part nobody saw coming. The second wife, a woman named Adana, 30 years old, a nurse, had known nothing. She had married a man named Uchenna in good faith, had a son with him, and had no idea she was living with a ghost. When the truth came out, she was as devastated as anyone, maybe more. And Ijeoma, who had every right to hate this woman, to see her as a symbol of everything that had been taken from her, did not. She asked to meet her. They sat across from each other in a quiet cafe in Owerri on a Wednesday afternoon. 2 women, 1 man, one enormous wreckage. Nobody recorded what they said to each other. But Ngozi, who drove Ijeoma there and waited outside, says that when Ijeoma came out after almost 2 hours, she looked lighter, like something had finally been put down. She told Ngozi later, "That woman did not break my marriage. A liar broke my marriage. She is just another person he deceived." Chukwuebuka was sentenced to 4 years in prison for fraud and 2 additional years for bigamy. Mr. Okonkwo Celestine received 3 years and was permanently barred from working in the financial sector. The insurance company, after reviewing the circumstances that Ijeoma had been an innocent party and had used the funds to support herself and her daughter, agreed to waive the full recovery of the payout. They recovered what could be traced to Chukwuebuka's new life. The rest, the court agreed, had been Ijeoma's survival money. She kept her shops, she kept her land, she kept Chisom. What she did not keep was bitterness. And that, if you ask anyone who knows her, is the most remarkable part of all. 2 years after the trial, Ijeoma gave an interview to a local newspaper. The journalist asked her what advice she would give to other women in similar situations. Women who discover that the person they trusted most has built their whole life on a lie. She thought about it for a moment. Then she said, "Do not collapse into the lie. The lie was his. The truth is yours. Stand in your truth and rebuild from there. You are not starting over. You are starting correctly for the first time." The journalist asked one more question. "Do you forgive him?" Ijeoma looked out the window for a moment. "Forgiveness," she said slowly, "is a gift I do not give to him. It is a decision I make for myself. I choose not to carry his poison. That is not the same thing as saying what he did was acceptable. It was not. But I refuse to spend the rest of my life being a prisoner of a man who was never worth the cage." There is a version of this story where Ijeoma falls apart, where the betrayal breaks her so completely she cannot find her way back, where the loss of trust, the humiliation, the years of false grief swallow her all. That version does not exist. Because the woman who once stood at a fake graveside and held her daughter and wondered how she would survive, that woman made a choice, quietly, without anyone watching. She chose to survive. And then she chose to thrive. And then she chose to stand in the courtroom and tell the truth, not because she wanted revenge, but because she wanted Chisom to grow up knowing that her mother did not let a lie define her life. Little Chisom, who is now 12 years old, asked her mother once, "Mama, are you sad about Daddy?" Ijeoma looked at her daughter for a long moment. "No," she said. "I was sad once, but sadness is like water. It fills the space you give it. I stopped giving it space." Chisom thought about this. Then she nodded, the way children nod when they understand something bigger than they are supposed to. Mr. Okonkwo Celestine, after serving his sentence, moved back to his hometown in Engu. He has not worked in banking since. People say he is a quieter man now. Whether that is guilt or simply age, nobody can say. Chukwuebuka was released after serving slightly under 4 years with good conduct. He returned to Owerri to nothing. His property business had collapsed. His second family had moved away. His first family, Ijeoma and Chisom, had no room for him. He tried once to see Chisom. Ijeoma allowed it. 1 meeting, supervised, 1 hour. He sat across from his daughter, who looked at him with the clear, steady eyes of her mother, and he said he was sorry. Chisom said, "I know, Daddy." And that was that. This story is not only about fraud. It is not only about betrayal. At its heart, it is about something much quieter and much more powerful. It is about what women are capable of when the world takes everything from them and expects them to stay broken. Ijeoma Obiechina did not stay broken. She used sand to build a foundation, because that is what you do when someone fills a coffin with sand and calls it death. You take that same sand and you build something they never expected. Something real, something lasting, something that cannot be faked. If this story moved you, if Ijeoma's strength, her clarity, her refusal to be destroyed by a man's deception, if any of that stayed with you, then subscribe to this channel. Because every week we bring you stories like this one. Stories of real people, complex, flawed, extraordinary people who faced the worst and did not look away. There is a Chisom somewhere, learning from a mother like Ijeoma. There is an Ijeoma somewhere, right now, standing at a crossroads wondering if she is strong enough. She is, and so are you. Subscribe, share this story, and come back next time, because the next one will leave you just as speechless.